We're going to start the session. So, as I said, good morning. I'm Rob Champa. Before we begin, I had the opportunity over the past week to meet with 10 C-level executives from various size firms. And I asked a question: what is go to market and what does it mean to you? And I got 10 different answers, which means this call this morning is really important because we need to demystify what GTM is. And by the way, in the chat, feel free to add what you think GTM is. Fortunately, our two amazing speakers this morning are going to go through the foundation of it and what it means. So today's session is called the GTM Wake Up Call, today's four-phase blueprint for predictable revenue. And as you look at this, predictable becomes a big deal, especially now because, between economic and political challenges, predictable revenue has become a lot less predictable, which emphasizes the importance of what's going on, in the GTM space. So I know there's a lot of talk about AI. We'll touch upon some of it. AI is not going to solve, AI is going to help a lot of things, but if you don't have your GTM house in order, that's going to be an issue. So I had the chance to meet Adam J. and Dale Zwizinski from Revenue Reimagined via Pam several months ago, more from a business perspective. And during my conversation with these two gentlemen, it was fantastic. It was spirited. Dale and I talked a little bit about hockey since we share, a similar passion there. But their approach was so novel that I said, we got to get you folks on Sammy, and this audience is going to be very, very important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to you gentlemen, and I'll let you talk a little bit about Revenue Reimagined, introduce yourselves, and I want to say welcome, good morning. Great to have you here, and no holds barred here. Take the gloves off, gentlemen.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. And I think we can probably fire up the presentation so we can start that up. Thanks so much for inviting us. We actually got the pleasure to work with Pam on a client actually down here in Tampa, Florida. I'm from Bradenton, Florida, originally from Boston, so that's how Rob and I were duking it out. And actually, we were messing around with who makes the
Ooh.
best cannolis up in the Boston area. So if you're a Bostonian, like put it in
It's
the chat, like who
Mike's.
who you believe is the best cannoli. So really quickly about me, we started Revenue Reimagined about 2 years ago now. Can't believe we're saying that. The idea was really to enable founders, revenue leaders, people that had really good ideas and products, and be able to get them out to the market, because you may have a good product, you may have a good operational experience, but sometimes that go to market is changing so quickly that we saw a lot of struggle in that space. So I've been a CRO for a long period of time. I've worked with startups and big companies like Oracle over my last 25 plus years. I've done it through 8 different countries. So I brought a lot of international technology into the US market. And we just wanted to, Adam, myself, and our third partner, Jake Rennie out of Utah, wanted to figure out a way to enable organizations to get to market much faster. It's changing so quickly. So it's a bit about me, and I'll hand it over to my partner in crime, Adam.
We'll be shorter. Oh, no, I'm kidding. Hey everyone, I'm Adam J. I like to call myself a recovering CRO. Managed to lead revenue at 7 or 8 different companies, everywhere from seed to, speaking of Boston, I was part of Toast's IPO. I led sales for Toast for the Southeast portion of the United States for a good period of time. I'm embracing my inner Boston this morning. I went to Dunkin' instead of Starbucks to embrace my Boston.
Mhm.
I do think Mike's makes a much better cannoli, and Boston has amazing Italian food. But I ultimately got tired of seeing founders and revenue leaders and CEOs making the same mistakes over and over and over again because they got bad advice from some LinkedIn guru or some VC who's looking at spreadsheets and saying, well, if you go hire 50 sales reps and give them $1 million quota each, you're going to get $50 million in revenue. P.S. That does not happen ever anywhere. And Dale actually convinced me after a really, really poor experience where the founder was selling what I like to call vaporware. It was literally Figma that was being mocked up as like, here's a product, pay us $30,000 and we'll build it. We didn't tell you we'll build it. We told you it existed. And Dale convinced me to go out on my own. And ultimately, that is how Revenue Reimagined was born. I can't imagine doing this on my own without Dale and Jake. It's very lonely for those of you in the consulting world, like doing this by yourself. Like I can't even begin to imagine. But excited to share with you all today, what we have coined the go-to-market gap, how to bridge that gap in a very systemized way, because as much as we all want to build it and they will come, build a company and you have scalability, that just doesn't happen. So Rob, Pam, and the rest of the Sammy team, thanks for having us.
Cool. Let's get rocking and rolling. And drop your questions in the comments. As we go through this, I see a lot of people in the comments with some AI focus, AI shifting, leading mode. So feel free to put some of that stuff in because we're doing some stuff in that space as well. So the verdict is in. We've seen this over and over again. CEOs, CFOs, they're just frustrated. They're frustrated with the go-to-market performance, top of funnel, bottom of funnel. We've had tons of challenges. There's a place where 57%, actually, I would say it's higher. This is from Martech leadership study, but I would say every company we go into, there may be some documentation on the go-to-market, but it's mostly in people's heads. It's modified, it's changed. They may have documented it 3 years ago, and they're like, "Oh, we're done documenting go-to-market." That's just not the way it moves anymore. We have to start pressure testing our go-to-market strategy at least quarterly. It's just happening. There's technology, there's things that are happening. And a lot of people are getting replaced. This is one of the reasons why Adam and I and Jake started this company. We're just seeing it used to be 18 months for go-to-market leaders. Like now it's under 12 months. Like people are just like getting rid of them. They're not giving them opportunities. But as we all know in this space, it's not easy. So we're seeing this evolution and shift, and we want to make it easier for a lot of these founders and revenue leaders. So before we put this up there, actually we can run this part. Who owns go-to-market today? In the comments, just put who you believe owns go-to-market today. Is it CEO? Is it CMO? Is it a CRO? Is it somebody else? Just curious what you guys think. And if I thought about this a little bit preface, I probably would have built a poll around it, but just drop your ideas in the comments. CMO and CRO. Yes, Adam, I do own GTM.
I mean, it
John,
is your title.
CRO.
You are the chief go-to-market officer.
It is true. I like that title. CEO, but yeah. Okay, cool. So you guys are all right. Actually, this was a poll that was done in 2022 then 2024. So it's shifted from a CMO to a CRO to now the CEO. So it's like this generational shift. But the reality is we all own it. Like we own it from the CEO has to give the strategy down level. But what we see in our business is that the CEO doesn't understand it enough, and we need to help them get across that. The other part is, and this is what we really enjoyed working with Pam at this client in Tampa, the breaking down of the silos. Like we've been talking about breaking down silos between marketing and sales. I don't know. I've been listening to it for like 10 years. But I think when you get a really good marketer that can drive into the sales execution space, that marriage of sales and marketing is super important. So we all own it.
So along the same lines of, who owns go-to-market, and Dale, you touched on the fact that most CEOs don't really know enough about go-to-market. Drop in the chat real quick how you define go-to-market. What is go-to-market? And I'll give you a hint. The answer is go-to-market is not sales. I had a CEO tell me that the other day. Go-to-market is sales. That is not the answer. What is go-to-market?
As you folks type your answers in, Dale and Adam, so question for you. The CEO may own it. Who runs it?
It's a great question.
I,
It,
I,
it,
yeah, good.
no,
Oh.
please. I love when you have all the answers.
Um, it needs to be, the CEO needs to run it from from a top down perspective, but then across the leadership, I don't think it belongs to one individual person. I think the CRO, which is, let's be honest, most CROs are just glorified VPs of sales. Like a really good CRO has marketing background, has marketing chops and sales chops and CS chops. Like I saw Ian in the post say product and CS is part of this, and absolutely, like a lot of people do not say that. So I think ultimately the CRO has to execute, but it can't be a VP of sales that's executing it. It's got to be someone that has those chops.
Yeah,
What do you
thank
say,
you,
Adam?
Dale. Adam,
Th-
there's some answers in the to your question about GTM in the text.
There, there are, and they're all good answers. Some of them are closer than others, but the real answer at the end of the day is that it is simply a transformational process, and it's your path to market. Go to market is how are you getting your product to market? That is sales, that is marketing, that is customer success, that is product. If you don't have all of these functions working together, you could build product could build the best thing in the world. But if you don't have sales and marketing to get it out into the world, it's never going to happen. Conversely, not Dale, no, I'm kidding. We could be the best sales leaders in the world, and we could sell what I would say, ice to an Eskimo. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a great product, you're not going to get it to market as well. So it's not a strategy, right? It's not a project. It is actually a process. It has to be repeatable and scalable, which Dale and I are going to talk about. As I said in the beginning, you don't just build it and suddenly get into scalability. You have to make your way there. Product, customer success, marketing, and sales have to work together. There are so many companies that we go into that I cannot tell you the last time a product person spoke to a marketing person. And you would be shocked at how many times the marketing people and the sales people, while they talk, they do a whole lot more of this. And it's this contest of, well, I gave you great leads and your sales team can't close them. Well, my sales team's great and your leads stink. That is not go to market. And it has to be this frictionless experience. You have to have this holistic team that ultimately is working together. But go ahead. Were you going to say something, Rob?
No, 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 no. I'm
Oh,
yeah, the
okay.
you're basically lighting up all my nightmares because I've been on both sides and I've been on both sides of that argument and it's just I'm recovering.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
me too.
PTSD. It's PTSD. Have another
Go to
Dunkin'. We'll be okay.
go to market has changed though, right? Like when you look at where go to market was in 2000 to 2010, it was all about like this marketing only inbound. Like we're going to drive people and they're going to come inbound and we're going to close these inbound leads. And that's great. That's every rep's dream. But that's also why a lot of reps now that started somewhere in that decade have no clue what it means and look at you like you have four heads when you tell them you have to go build your own pipeline. So 10 to 20, it changed a little. This is where sales outbound started, the term full cycle AE, right? You're going to build your pipeline. You're going to cold call, use LinkedIn, use email. You have to build your pipeline and close your own deals. What? Marketing's not giving me everything? No, you actually have to do some work, was 10 to 20. And then as we are moving further down into 10, 20, and beyond, now we have this integrated go-to-market team, right? So now there's like six real go-to-market motions that organizations can use. Some use all of them. Some should only use one or two, but you have inbound, which is everyone's favorite, right? Build this great website, this great product, and build it, and they're going to come. Every rep's dream. Outbound, product-led growth. So think companies like ClickUp or Asana, go to the website, use the product, and then get your pop-ups for upsells. Partner, which is becoming, increasingly more popular. And then community slash network, which I have very strong feelings on that we could do a whole separate webinar on, being the number one go-to-market motion. But all of these is kind of this evolution of go-to-market that we've seen over the past 2 decades.
And
So,
real
gentlemen,
quickly before, oh,
go ahead,
go ahead.
Dale.
No, go ahead, Rob.
The
You got it.
When you talk about one of the that we see quite frequently is org structure. And we're living in the age of cuts and things like that. With the new
Mhm.
GTM that you're proposing, what does that mean for the org structure? Is it more heads, fewer heads, et cetera? What are you witnessing?
Go ahead, Adam. I answered the last one.
I think across the board, we're seeing fewer heads. We're seeing consolidation. We're seeing sales leaders that are, being forced or asked to step into marketing leaders that need to know sales. And then there's the advent of AI. I don't believe AI is coming for everyone's job. I think there's a lot of human work that cannot be replaced. But I do think that AI is going to replace the lower level repeatable tasks where you needed a marketing coordinator to do deep competitive research where now like I was watching a video this morning of building your own agent to do competitive research in like less than 30 seconds. I personally love it. I think it forces all of us to focus on what I've always termed revenue producing activities and allowing the AI instrumentation to do these non-revenue producing activities. But Rob, what you're going to see, in my opinion, is much smaller, much leaner teams that are hyper focused on these roles that have to drive revenue and AI agents that are going to do all these repeatable tasks that we've been paying people, high five, low six figures for
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam.
If we go up one slide quick, Adam, so the one
Forward.
thing that we don't, the one above. Yeah, so the one thing we haven't put in here, and it's really 2020 plus, and I think this is because most of the people in the room have an AI slant based on the profiles that you guys put in there. Um, Back to what Adam was saying, there's this AI agent space happening and it's blowing up. And we think go to market's changing so quickly. Like this AI agent space is changing so rapidly. New models, new iPaaS platforms like Gumloop and N8N and Make. And they're all combining together. And now we're getting the MPC. So I don't know if you guys have looked at the MPC, that open source integration layer. So forget about the APIs. Now we're going to go on the MPC. This stuff is going to change and evolve the go-to-market strategy, and we can't be afraid of it. So we got to keep testing and playing around with it. But I can tell you, because one of the things that we go in and see a lot, every CRM we go into every company is completely messed up. They've hired some VP of sales, they've hired some VP of marketing, and they're like, I know how to configure HubSpot. And then like they configure HubSpot and they have workflows overwriting each other, and you have like sales processes that are broken. And it's like now you got to unwind all that stuff. And then exponentially, now you're gonna put these automated agents on it. And that problem is gonna like you think you have a problem now, like exponentially, we were talking about this right before we got on. Pam was saying you don't know where that data is coming from, and you almost have to debug. I'm a programmer by heart, so you almost have to debug where that problem started and unwind everything. So
Yeah.
we gotta go. We need to dig in there, but it's starting.
Yeah, Dale, I hate to correct you, but you use CRM and messed up in the same sentence.
Thank you. Let's go. Okay, so the brutal truth. Only 24% of companies are hitting their growth targets. I would actually hypothesize that this is way lower even now. We're working with companies and we go into companies, we know things are not the best that they could be, or else we would not be going in there a lot of times. So we see things that are even lower, but then we're trajectorying up. Like how do we take a step back and not do what I won't take Adam's thunder on one of his quotes, but how do we not go through this process over and over again? And we're going through these traditional go-to-market playbooks that are like even less effective than it was before. So we're actually one of the shifts that we've seen over the last couple of years is customer success, revenue generation on customer success. Now you have an evolution where the power struggle goes from the front of funnel to the expansion back of funnel. And how do we make that modification and transformation? Because let's be honest, and I've worked with a lot of CS teams, they're really not sales revenue generators. Their mindset's a little different, so we have to educate them. They're always about like taking care of the customer, but now they have to grow revenue, and it's like, what is NRR and like how does that all work? And so we go through this evolution path. And so when we look at it, and this is just a little bit of a repeating place, um 92% of startups are failing. Like it's just it's failing at a much higher rate. We've always had high rates, but after the great transition, after COVID, a lot of this stuff happening, we're getting a lot of zombie startup companies. Like they can't get more funding. They're stuck in this place that they may have a little bit of capital. So a lot of people are dying or they're getting ingested into other companies, which everyone should be aware of and having a strategy. So, and the other two we've talked about a little bit. So here's the brutal truth. Like you don't have a marketing problem, you don't have a sales problem, you don't have a CS problem, or even a product problem. Like there are problems, you have a go-to-market problem. So each one of these things contribute to the strategy going into go-to-market.
So one of the things that
Um,
comes up, guys, is that, and couldn't agree more. And as we prepped for the upcoming webinar and I spoke with folks, people say, can I only apply GTM if I'm bringing a new product to market? I said, no, but you guys are the experts here. At which point do we revisit our GTM strategy when we're stalled in the marketplace?
I mean, I'm a big believer that your go-to-market strategy is similar to your ICP. It's regardless of whether things are going well or not. If you are not revisiting it at least every quarter, you're going to fall behind. Things could be going great today, but the key to a successful go-to-market is to be ahead of the eight ball and to be changing before you start seeing that revenue declining, before you start seeing that churn, before you start seeing customers not converting from your website anymore.
A couple of good questions in, if I may. Gord's asking, why has ROI gone down so much since 2022?
Yeah, I think some of it is blamed on the economy, but I just think some of it is blamed on going from a going from a grow at all cost model, which we'll talk about, and I saw EJ. Yeah, we're GTM partners, so we get them from the GTM partner group. We love their slides. I'm a big fan of Sangram and a good friend of his. And it was like growth at all costs back to like responsible growth. And so our ethos within Revenue Reimagined is being responsible with the growth and getting back to foundation fundamentals. Like in our philosophy, the reason why the ROI has been going down is because people are not doing the basic stuff. Like salespeople sending recaps 24 hours after going and having a customer client meeting, understanding really what the process looks like. So all of the basic foundational stuff is super important for getting the ROI. Cool. Yeah, so EJ, yes. We love the GTM Partners group, and they go through this process of the five valleys of the go-to-market death. So like you can create but you can't market. Adam talked about that a little bit. You can market but you can't sell. You can sell but you can't deliver. This is an interesting one. I was working at a startup company in California doing voice AI before generative AI came out, before OpenAI. And the challenge was we just got a Series A. We were looking to build out the sales team. We built out the sales team. We were selling. We were going like really quickly, but AI wasn't robust enough yet or wasn't democratized enough. And it took us like 6, 8, 10 months to deliver. And we got so far behind, we couldn't sell anymore. And then so once you get the revenue flywheel running, that is important. Like that's hard enough. But if you stick a spoke in that revenue flywheel and stop it, like forget it. Like to restart that revenue flywheel is very difficult, especially if you get some bad responses from customers. This is another one. This I absolutely love this. This Rob, this goes back to your question, the ROI question, going from growth at all costs to efficient growth at scale. So when you look at these, I'm not going to read through them all. I think the thing I really like about this is there's a world where a lot of the people on this call and consultants in this space, it's forget about hiring like a VP of sales, a VP of marketing inside the organization. Think about how to build out all that infrastructure and get it running properly. We'll give you the framework here in a second, but get it all working properly before you can actually grow.
So what's the definition of insanity? This is my second favorite thing that I tell my child, who I'm surprised hasn't popped in here yet. Someone throw it in the chat. I know we all know the answer to this one. Yes. It's doing the same exact thing over and over again and expecting different results. Or as I tell my kid, nothing changes. And as we tell every founder, nothing changes if nothing changes. You cannot keep doing the exact same thing and then come back as your funding dwindles, as your revenue dwindles, as your churn increases and say, well, I don't know why it's happening because you're not changing anything. So to do that, you have to bridge what we've called the go-to-market gap. And said very simply, the GTM gap is the disconnect and the inefficiencies that ultimately happen when your go to market strategy, execution, or team doesn't meet the needs of the market, doesn't meet the customers, or doesn't meet the growth objectives. It's the space between the mountain. So many times, I did this yesterday. I'm looking at a sales process, and the stages are demo, vendor of choice, trial. How many times are you going to talk to your customer? Mark, I'm going to pick on you because you're in the center of my screen and I see you nodding. Where are you in your sales process? Oh, I'm in vendor of choice. I'm in demo. No one answers you that way. Your sales process has to be aligned to your buyer's journey. Your go to market motion has to be aligned to your buyer's journey. And what causes this misalignment is one of four things that we typically see in our practice. You have this poor collaboration, sales, marketing. I talked about the success. The goals are all over the place, right? Marketing's like, my goal is I need to get you 250 MQLs. Sales is like, well, your MQLs don't convert to pipeline, so your MQLs don't matter. Product wants to build this feature that, as a product manager, I think is great that no customer has ever asked for. You got to make sure that you're aligned. Next, you have this market fit, right? If you don't understand your customer's needs, if you don't solve deep pain, and if you can't explain your value proposition in 30 seconds or less, you are not going to be successful. When we ask founders, CEOs, sales reps, revenue leaders, what does your company do? I literally have a post-it on my computer. What's the number one problem your product solves in 30 seconds or less? If you can't answer that without a 7-minute dissertation, I promise you your customers are not going to buy from you. Inefficient processes. We have to get to repeatable systems. Listen, when you're early and you're, super early startup, yes, do what doesn't scale. Document the heck out of it so we could figure out what works. But as you start hiring and as you start working for repeatability, you have to have a way to manage that pipeline, measure performance, know what's working, know what to repeat, and know what to throw out the window. And then lastly is this premature scaling, right? Like I chuckle and joke about it when I started. You'd be amazed how many investors we have heard tell people, hey, Pam, go hire 10 reps, give them a quote of $1 million each. You're going to hit 80% of that. So now your new number is $8 million. It's not as simple as hiring reps. We all saw what happened when all of these companies decided to rapidly hire reps. Not a good process. And what does it cause? Ultimately, these three things, right? You're going to lose revenue because you have missed opportunities. You're being wildly inefficient. Your team is chasing leads and chasing prospects that are not ideal fit. You have this team frustration because no one's hitting their numbers, from marketing to sales to success to product who's building features that ultimately aren't being used. I'm not a product person, but Dale, I'd imagine as an engineer that if you spend weeks and weeks and weeks building something that never gets used, that's probably a pretty crap feeling. So you have people who are in the team getting upset and they're ultimately going to leave. And then you have this customer attrition. You're signing customers that ultimately aren't good fit customers. The handoff process is, poor at best, and your customers are going to leave. So many people think product market fit is building something and we get a few early great sales and like boom, we have product market fit. I will tell you, product market fit starts when your first customers are up for renewal and they continue renewing and they're using your product.
So we're going to jump into what is the go-to-market gap. So we kind of described the challenges or things that are happening with the go-to-market gap. So we have four phases in the go-to-market gap. The first one's stabilization. So does not matter where we're going into, we always want to stabilize and figure out what is happening. A lot of times we're going in and companies are like, we need more top of funnel, or we're stuck in the middle of funnel, or we need to close more. Like there's all sorts of things that they're saying. What we realized over this evolution of the organization is like what they say maybe a root, maybe a branch of the root of the problem. We want to get to the root of the problem. So we need to do a little bit of diagnosis before we just jump in. We made mistakes when we first started where we would just jump in and start trying to fix stuff, and then it was like a firefight, and then scope creep was happening, and it's like spending so much time on things. So we took a step back. We do a whole go-to-market audit across the entire life cycle from culture all the way to product CS. So you really get a holistic picture. Then hold on one sec. Let me just go. So some of the things that you're doing in this is aligning ICP and core messages, focusing really on short-term wins. Back to value. A lot of these companies are trying to close some deals. They're struggling with revenue. They're trying to get the next round of funding. They just got funding. So they just lost their head of sales or head of marketing. So we want to identify those and get a uh, stabilized place to then get into the next part, which is the foundation layer. So once we're stabilized, once we have the right people, or we think we have the right people, we can actually go into the foundation mode. And in foundational, what we're doing is building alignment, process automation. We're starting to build those sales processes out. So once we understand what the processes are, once we understand where your gates are, entrance and exit criteria, what workflows look like, where you need to get the data, you can start building those repeatable frameworks. But if you don't stabilize and you start building a foundation on like non-stabilized concrete, for example, you're really in trouble. So we want to get to the foundation piece. Once we start getting foundationally, we can now get to repeatability. So Adam said this earlier. We go into every company and they're like, we want a repeatable process. And we're like, okay, but you have a crappy CRM and your process is broken and you're not getting leads, but you want repeatability. And oh, by the way, a lot of times, unfortunately, when we go in, we have to do evaluations of the sales team or the marketing team or the people part of it. And they may have the wrong people in the wrong place. And they were good 2 years ago for the organization, but it shifted. So are they coachable? We got to figure all that stuff out. Once you have stabilization, once you get in the foundation, now you can start building repeatability. And in that repeatability place, you can build all of your all of your documentation, SOPs, and it's starting to run, and you can start hiring people. You have your onboarding going on, and you can then start iterating. And then once you get repeatable business, what everybody wants, you want to get into scalability. So different markets, new verticals, different teams. But here's a cautionary tale. Once you get into scalability, you're going to end up back in stabilization. And this isn't, I want to be clear, this is not a step process. You can be in multiple places, multiple phases at one time. So you could be in stabilization and foundation, and it could be marketing's in one, sales is in the other. So, and you could get into foundation repeatability and find out that you broke something and you have to go back to stabilization. Like this is not a linear process. It's very fluid. And so sometimes it's hard to get your arms around, like, when do I get out of one phase or the other? It's a bit of a feel, but we have a couple of ways to actually identify that.
Yeah, this is a great point. So the problem sometimes is when you're in this, you can't see beyond your nose. And you mentioned something when you started talking about stabilization specifically. You talked about, I think it was a sales leader leaving. So for you folks, there are signals. Again, we get so caught up in things, we miss the signals. So as you've gone through this process, which I think is fantastic, what are some of the signals, maybe signals for stabilization or signals for foundation? So what should the people on this call, as they're looking at this, what should they be looking for so they're not caught in the weeds?
Yeah, I think, the first thing you need to look for and understand is what are the four stages, right? Most people have no idea what the four stages are. So we spend a good amount of time in the audit, educating on what the four stages are. And then, Rob, the next portion of where we're going is how you define success from each stage. But very simply said, if it is not working consistently and you are not seeing the same type of customers, paying the same price, articulating the value in the same way, you are not at the place that you could have a repeatable process. You are likely in either foundation or stabilization. And where that difference falls to me is, do you have documentation? Do you have customers that are leaving or customers that are staying? One of the things, and I have tell me more back here, it used to say time kills deals, but customers didn't like that. You got to go 2 or 3 layers deep to deeply understand where you are, right? The example I use, or what your customer wants. My wife used to lead a engineering team, and she had a client that was like, "Oh, we want a purple unicorn that goes across the screen when we push enter." And most companies, the answer would be like, well, we're not building a purple unicorn for you. Are you out of your mind? But tell me more and understanding why. Like every software they had a purple unicorn because that is very much their brand, and the software was internal and external facing. And without it, they're not moving forward. They were willing to pay the development cost to have that done. But most folks would have just simply said, Rob, we're not building you a purple unicorn. Tell me more allowed them to get that deal. You have to do that at every part of your go to market. You have to go 2 or 3 layers deep to really understand where you are. So as we go into what success looks like for each one of these phases, you have to move, like Dale said, you can't go from stabilization to repeatability. You can't go from stabilization to scalability. So each stage you do have to move linear, but you can be in different stages in different parts of your go-to-market motion. We have seen marketing very much in repeatability, arguably scalability, while sales very much was back in foundation or stabilization. That is not uncommon. Stabilization to foundation is where you're building that momentum. I would argue this is the most critical phase, in my opinion. Dale might disagree, but you got to have that momentum. It's got to be, where you're like, wow, like we can do this. We can drive revenue. You have foundation to repeatability, which is where you get that clarity. Oh, this is what we need to do. This is how this should work. This is what this process should look like. And then ultimately, when you go to that scalability, that's where you have that confidence of like, holy crap, I got something that's working here. Like we can go into a new vertical. We could build, a new part of the product. Like this is something that people really want. So in stabilization, ultimately what we're trying to do, and for better or worse in our line of work, no one calls us because things are going amazing, right? I was having this conversation with someone yesterday. I wish it was like, oh, things are going great. Come help us make it better. Normally, we have to go back to stabilization a little bit. We're fixing those immediate challenges. This could be operational cleanup, such as CRM. True story, we have a client. Everyone on this call, I'm sure, is familiar with Salesforce. You start here with whatever your first stage is, and you work to closed one. They start here and they close their deals in that first stage. And they wonder why they can't run any reporting. So we got to fix that, right? You can't run a business without reporting other than everything being in Excel. You got to make sure your customers understand what your product offering is. You have to be able to manage that pipeline. We're looking for quick wins. And Dale alluded to this, for better or worse, one of the things that we're asked to do often is assess the team. And you'd be surprised how many times we come in and the first thing we hear from a CEO is, Dale, one of the first things I want you to do is fire the entire sales team and start over. They suck. Sometimes you might have 1 or 2 people that need to go, but usually it's not the sales team that sucks. It's that they weren't enabled to be successful. They don't have the tools to be successful. Give us 30, 60, 90 days with them, and then let's figure out if it's a seller issue or if this is a deeper issue that they just haven't been enabled properly. Then we move into foundation. And this is where we're working to drive alignment. We're working to build those initial systems. We're documenting everything. I tell every founder, every CEO, every revenue leader, everything you do, document it. I don't care if it's in a Word doc, a notes doc, a voice doc, a Google doc, just put it somewhere. What works and what doesn't. And then we'll figure out how to properly document that and build your processes. Tech stack is a big part of this. We are coming off of, in the last few years, what I think was this like, you have budget, go buy a tool. And you now have 37 tools that do, 20 of the same things, and there's a lot of overlap. So really looking at what the right tech stack is, eliminating some of that bloat and making sure that we're using the best tools within the budget, making sure that there's goal setting across the board. Every single department should have a revenue goal. Revenue is a company-wide goal, not just a sales goal. So making
Yeah,
sure that
Adam.
we're all,
Yeah, if I could chime in, somebody made a not a question but a comment, but I think it's relevant here.
yeah.
Um, Jennifer, appreciate your note. She said, "Glad you mentioned enablement as a stabilizing element." So I'm going to turn it into a question. When I've done turnarounds, this the silver bullet 9 times out of 10 has been enablement. Yeah, you get everything fixed. So where does enablement is enablement implied throughout here, or what do you have to do to get people to drink the enablement Kool-Aid?
Yeah, I think it's a big lift. And this is why we say to people like you can't just go fire everybody because now we have to go all the way back to like what's your job description? Like are we measuring people to the right things you want to measure to? So then you get into compensation plans and like so that Pandora's box is very big and it becomes its like we've learned it becomes its own entity. So we manage things through ClickUp. We do 3 week sprints on our things. And so when you start opening up Pandora's box on enablement, it's like what your onboarding documents look like. Where are your videos? Like, have you trained the people? Like, so we go and we hire these people, call it at $100,000. Let's use a rough order of magnitude. And then we are like, here's how the product works. Here's a couple of videos from 2 years ago. Oh, by the way, the product's changed a little bit, but go watch these videos. Oh, and by the way, we have a couple of the webinars and here are a couple of customer videos. Like go figure it out yourself. And then we wonder 3 months later why they're failing. And then like we blame the person and then we don't coach them. So the enablement goes all the way through the coaching aspect. So that Pandora's box is very big. And I think we need to be honest with ourselves. If you don't enable people, then you can't blame the people. And so once we go through that process, um, it takes a little bit of time. I get shaky and PTSD when we have to start going through that process because it's a big lift.
Yeah, it's at every stage. It's one of the biggest things that
Oh
we
yeah.
see
Thank you.
across the board
Yeah.
is just it lacks. And I don't know why, because historically, like when I and listen, every company is different, but even Toast in early, Series A days, we had an enablement team of like 7 people. At its peak, they had an enablement team of over 70. And I'm not saying you need a team of 70, but like you need real sales enablement. Sales enablement is not marketing handing sales a slide deck and saying, "Here, you're enabled." That's product marketing.
Yeah, I think you're spot
Yeah.
on. Here's a reality. AI and LLMs is sexy. Okay, enablement is ugly, and
Yeah.
people don't. It's just, and it's so foolish, and we have to figure out a way to make it better. And great points, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, so to wrap up the transitions in foundation, this is where we're really making sure that sales, marketing, customer success are ultimately working together. We're standardizing, those processes. This is where we're starting to build those playbooks. Again, they're not set it and forget it. We're starting to build them. They're iterative consistently throughout. We talked about the tech stack. This is where the goals are being put together, right? What are the clear, whether you want to use KPIs, OKRs, rocks, we're big fans of EOS, whatever it is, what are the goals for the business? And then carry that down to each individual department. And then training and enablement, making sure that we are equipping these teams, not just with the skills, not just with the resources, with both that they need to ultimately be successful. We go into repeatability, and then this is where we are reviewing what's working and what's not, right? In order for it to be repeatable, it's got to be consistent. We're starting to build those customer feedback loops. The number one thing you need to do, in my opinion, is use that voice of the customer. Whatever we build, whatever we say, whatever we sell, if it doesn't resonate with the customer and solve deep customer pain, you're going to start to see churn. So you got to get that feedback loop going. We talked about iterating on those playbooks consistently. And then this is where we're seeing that consistency across teams, right? If we're in a repeatable motion, I know that if I hire 2 reps, arguably with the same skill set, I give them the same training, they're given the same type of accounts, we could expect the same type of repeatable results. This is where you could start doing some of your real modeling, right? We talk about the difference between bottoms up and top down. This is where we know that if we're hiring right, if we hire Adam and Dale, we could expect them to hit this type of target. If we hire a new demand person, we could expect them to be responsible for this much pipeline, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is where the automation comes in. This is where that deeper layer of AI comes in, where we could start to streamline these repetitive tasks and start to have humans focusing on that revenue producing activity. And then lastly, we go to scale. This is strategic market expansions. We're using our data to identify new markets, new segments for growth potential. We're hiring, not just hiring 8 people with $1 million quota and calling it $8 million. We are strategically hiring, focusing on these roles that directly contribute to our scaling efforts. We're working on that operational scalability, so systems, processes. Maybe now you're moving from billing out of QuickBooks to something like a Maxio or a SaaS Logic. You're actually building that scalability so that things are more automated. Your revenue is predictable at this point, right? We know looking at Salesforce or HubSpot, we know what that pipeline is. We know what our win rates are. We know what our retention is. We could go put together a deal room if we're getting funding and speak to our data with confidence as to what all of our metrics are. And most importantly, and where we see a lot of companies get this wrong in scalability, you gotta preserve that culture. You gotta preserve that team cohesion. You have to have alignment with the organization. It's really important that we don't just go hire a bunch of people and ultimately, we're losing this culture. Dale and I talk a lot about when we hire, we're not looking for culture fits, right? We're looking for culture additions. We're looking for people who can make our culture better. We're looking for people who can make the company better.
So just wrapping stuff up here. This is kind of who we are. We've done a lot of work in the space. We're evolving through this into an AI place. One of the biggest gaps we have, to be honest with you, is our scalability. We have 3 partners. We get deep in people's business. So like we are your CRO, we do a lot of the work. So we need to figure out ways to offload all of the work that we do and put it into a systemized process. And we're working through that today. With that, we'll take any questions.
So let's, right off the bat, first of all, guys, this was fantastic. Anything coherent around go to market is a big addition. So we've got a lot of people on the call, and when the call ends, and we do this in typical Sammy fashion, what's the one thing everybody needs to do at 9:05 this morning, based on what you said? You talked about quick wins.
I'll take it
Go ahead.
first. Document everything you know, like get it out of your head. Open up a ChatGPT window, start talking to it, let it write an SOP for you, start at that process. Because one of the biggest things we see is that no one has it documented. So we're like the first thing we're doing is interviewing the founders, the revenue leaders, any of those people. So get as much of it documented. It may not be perfect, but like I use GPT with a microphone and just talk back and forth to it and like get that motion moving. That's what I would do.
I agree with what Dale said, but I would say take a long, hard look in the mirror and ask yourself which phase of the go-to-market gap are you in, and how do you move to the next one?
Now, following this thread, let's go back to the beginning. We talked about the role of the CEO, who owns GTM, how are we running this? So, from an operational perspective, let's say I'm missing my number, okay, and I've yet to find a company who hasn't said that over the past 6 months. I'm missing my number. We got to update the GTM. What's the play? Is it, hey, we're setting up a meeting next week and we got 4 people in the room? So tactically, what's done next week now? We talked about what's done at 9:05. Okay, what's done a week from today? Who's in that room?
Yeah.
And what are they walking out of that room with this fabulous GTM model that you've laid out?
So I could take that because I'm going through it right now with a client of ours. And that is the exact situation. So we are meeting next week on site. We're very big on there's certain things you could do on Zoom. I've never worked in an office, but I believe very much there's certain times you need people in a room. CRO, marketing leader, sales leader, success leader, product leader, 2-day offsite. We are all going to be in a room with a whiteboard, agenda ahead of time. And we are looking at everything from the very top of the funnel with marketing. What are they doing to create demand? What are we seeing convert? What are we not? How are we scoring leads? How are we driving the leads? To what is the sales process? To we're pulling in customer calls using some proprietary AI to understand what are customers and prospects asking for. Why are customers churning? We're working to synthesize all that data, Rob, and then ultimately rebuild. Product's a little harder to rebuild, right? But the entire, marketing, sales, success motion from the ground up, but starting with how are we getting those customers? How is marketing helping the sales team bringing in business? And then what is the sales team's conversation, talk track, objection handling to ultimately close business and accelerate that deal velocity?
Okay, excellent, Adam. By the way, everybody on the call, feel free to chime in or drop more questions in the chat. I've got another one before we wrap up in a minute or so here. So let's talk about the dashboard. Okay, so we've just we've done what we said. We have the team in the room. Are we augmenting our existing dashboards, our KPIs? Is the success of GTM measured via proxy things like our existing pipeline stuff, most of which can be bullshit? So how am I measuring? We talked about getting this all. Is success just the bottom line, or how do you measure success? How do we track it? Is it tracked weekly, monthly? What does it look like?
Yeah, we are big proponents of aligning and setting expectations and measuring them weekly. It's not that you have to, like, when you start failing, what ends up happening when you have a systematic failure, it's actually over a series of time. So if you start missing 1% every week, like in a quarter, you're off by, 30%, for example. So if you're missing just a little bit at a time, the faster you can catch where you're off, the more you can course correct. So I think the challenge is most people don't want to do all the work all the time. Once you set the work up and get it into a place on dashboards or conversations, then you can actually measure it weekly and just try to iterate over it. I'll give you an example. We have a customer. We were struggling with pipeline. We were struggling two things. Closing deals, they had one big rep that was closing all their big deals, and then we had a top of funnel problem. So they had two problems on both sides of the funnel. And so one of the things I talked to the sales leader about, so they had a CRO and they had a VP of sales, and we were kind of there to help them both out. What I told the sales leader on their Monday calls, and I recommend everyone do sales calls on Monday. I don't know why people are doing them on Friday, but that's another whole conversation. That they make the sales reps call their pipeline generation for the week and number of meetings that they're having. Call it in the beginning of the week, use GPT for the end of the week, and they do a weekend, and then find out where they stand. Did they hit the number? Did they not hit the number? Just get them into that iteration, and then we can start reporting on it, and then we can see like who's really like, and then you got to figure out where the deals are going. Too many people are looking at activity, how many calls, how many emails. Like that's complete horseshit. Sorry if I offend anybody. That's complete bullshit. It's really about pipeline, because if you understand the opportunities in pipeline you're building, you can go backward to activity or you can go forward to revenue. So if we hit it in the middle, I get so tired of people talking about activity all the way to the investment and board level. Like it's so bad. If we look at pipeline, that's indicating both forward and backward where our business really is.
Perfect. Thanks, Teal. As we wrap up, Mark, did you have a question?
I just want to thank you guys. I think this model makes so much sense. I'm a sales guy, and I think in terms of bottom of the funnel. And when I look at the stabilization, getting the quick win, and I work in manufacturing marketing, so most of my clients are under 20, 25 people. So I don't have to worry about thousands of calls. In fact, I prefer fewer, more qualified people. And I continue to reinforce that. But I always tell the CEO, you're responsible for sales. Don't put it off on some website company or somebody that's a quasi marketing. But I love the model that you built here. It's something that I just gravitated to because I'm not as good at doing all these other things that you guys do. But that's where my success is, and my clients love it. But they don't understand their customer and the traffic that's coming in. And the second point I just wanted to make is that I personally believe that community is the last best strategy. I live manufacturing. I am the manufacturing ambassador. And that's my brand. And people are coming to me like never before, but it's taken me 11 years to sort of build it. But anyway,
I
those are
love
just
that.
my thoughts.
Mark, so what you said is super important, especially in the sales environment today. Like we're seeing so much AI with emails and phone calls and all this stuff. It's really the knowledge worker. So you're a knowledge worker. You understand your niche very well. And so if someone's having an issue, they will trust you way more than they'll trust anybody else. And that trust proxy is what we need to build across the board. This is where salespeople fail. Like they don't understand the trust proxy and they want a quick win. It like they forget the 11 years. Like you're starting to be successful, people are coming to you, but they forget underneath that iceberg was like those 11 years of like blood, sweat, tears to get where you are. So congrats on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I'm going to hand it over to Pam. So Dale and Adam, thank you very much, and for everybody who attended today. Hopefully this was great. We've got some fantastic stuff coming up. So Pam, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And Dale, Adam, thank you so much for being with us today. As you mentioned, we had
Thank
the
you for having
opportunity.
us.
Of course, we had an opportunity to work together on a client, which was super fun, and there was alignment from second one. So just great to have you here and get exposure to your methodology for everybody. For everybody else, the recording will be available next week in the meetup group. So if you're registered for the session, you'll get the link. And 2 upcoming events, right? So 2 weeks from today, we're going to have a live meetup. Laura Krachanova is on the call. Any Excuse CMO, we're going to be meeting up with our friends at Any Excuse CMO at Craft Food Halls at City Point in Waltham. No fee to attend. It's buy your own food and drink. Show up if you can. It's close to the Westin Waltham if you've gone to previous events, but it's a world away as far as the venue and the vibe. It's a really cool spot. So I actually have a link that I can put in the chat if we have a minute, and hopefully I can talk and chat at the same time. Let's see. So join us on May 29th if you can. Here is the link for more information. Register or just show up. And then our next virtual session, which will be the final session for our season, we operate on the academic calendar, is Carol Myers on June 12th. Carol is a regular at Sammy Sessions, and she's amazing. And she does not do a lot of speaking. So she very, very kindly agreed to speak with us on June 12th on a session called Restructure, Rethink, Reignite Sales and Marketing Organizations in the Age of AI. Great follow on to what we heard from Dale and Adam today. And I think of it as really the capstone of our whole season. If you think about what we've talked about this year, right? And you'll walk away with a framework for evaluating AI's role on the go-to-market function. So highly relevant. Please join that. That's up in the meetup as well. So with that, we're going to close 9:01. You have your homework assignment for 9:05 as given to you by Rob and Dale and Adam. So have a great day, have a great weekend, and we'll see you all on May 29th and or on June 12th. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye now.